What's the very first image that, hits your brain? Be honest.
Oh, for me, it's usually those Hubble telescope images.
Yeah.
You know, that deep, infinite dark space, swirling galaxies, nebulas, black holes.
Exactly. For us, here in the 21st century, the universe is this huge, cold, abstract thing. It's physics. It's almost infinite.
Mm-hmm.
But, and here's the hook for today's deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
If you were standing on the banks of the Euphrates River, say 4,000 years ago, and you used the word universe, you weren't talking about stars.
No, not at all.
You weren't even talking about space.
No, you were likely talking about politics.
Or geography. You're probably talking about your neighbors.
And that is the crucial shift we have to make today. We're taking a deep dive into the groundbreaking work of the thinker and historian Safa Kaçmaz.
Right.
We're looking at his upcoming book, SOCİOGONY, which translates to Introduction to Sociogony.
And I have to say, the materials we have from Kaçmaz for this they're honestly a bit brain-bending. He's basically arguing that we've been reading ancient mythology completely wrong for centuries.
He really is.
He's saying that when these ancient texts talk about heaven and earth, they aren't talking about theology or magic.
Oh.
They're talking about two very specific, very real societies.
Right. And Kaçmaz, he frames this as a shift from cosmology, which is, the study of the creation of the universe,
What's the cosmos?
to sociogony, which is the study of the creation of society. His main thesis is that the religious literature of Mesopotamia, which later became the framework for the Bible, the Iliad, and the Quran, it's actually a coded map of a political reality.
Okay, so let's unpack that.
Yeah.
Because the core of Kaçmaz's argument rests on a very specific geographical divide. He says the universe for the Mesopotamian mind was just a combination of two things, Gok and Yer.
Heaven and earth.
Heaven and earth. But these weren't like up and down where they...
Not in the way we think of them today, no. This is where the geography of the Euphrates River Basin becomes the key, the decoder ring, really.
Okay.
Kaçmaz identifies heaven and earth as actual concrete locations. So when the texts say earth or Yer, they're referring to the south, the land physically below the Euphrates River.
Which is the civilization of Sumer.
Correct. And conversely, when they say heaven Gok, they're talking about the north, the land above the Euphrates.
So that's Akkad.
That's Akkad.
So Feret Nelti, which is below the Euphrates, is earth or Sumer.
Mm.
And Feret Tin Ustu, above the Euphrates, is heaven or Akkad. It's a map.
It is a map, but it's also a cultural description. Kaçmaz lists these really fascinating symbolic binaries that define these two opposing lifestyles. It wasn't just a line on a map. It was a clash of two completely different ways of being.
I loved this list in the notes. It's it's almost eerie. Let's run through them because it really does paint a picture.
Oh.
So for Earth, that's the Sumerians in the south, your settled life, agriculture.
Right. And for heaven, the Akkadians in the north, you have the hunter-shepherd lifestyle. They're nomadic, mobile.
And for Earth, you also have the night, the moon, the color black, and the metal silver.
And then for heaven, you have the total opposite, the day, the sun, the color white, and the metal gold.
It really lines up, doesn't it? I mean, the farmers down south are literally tied to the soil, to the earth. Mm-hmm. They're working with mud, flood cycles, the dark, fertile ground.
Precisely. And the shepherds up north, they live under the open sky. Their roof is the heavens. They represent air, movement, the sun, and usually the military power that comes with that kind of mobility.
So heaven became the symbol for the ruling, mobile class, the Akkadians. Mm-hmm. And earth became the symbol for the productive, settled class, the Sumerians.
Exactly. So according to Kaçmaz, when these ancient texts speak of the universe, what they're describing is the interaction between these two distinct cultures. The universe is just the sum of the shepherd kings and the farmer subjects. It is the social order itself.
That's such a bold claim. I mean, it sounds great in theory, but we have to test it against the actual texts. Let's look at the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation myth.
Perfect place to start. Yeah, it's one of the oldest stories we have.
Right.
Okay, so let's look at the opening lines of Tablet 1. It reads, "When on high the heaven had not been named, below the earth had not been called by name."
Now, usually you and I, we read that and we think, okay, nothing existed yet. It was a void.
A blank canvas.
Yeah, a blank canvas.
That is the standard cosmological reading. But Kaçmaz points out something really specific here. The text doesn't say heaven and earth didn't exist.
It says they hadn't been named.
Exactly. And words matter so much here. What does naming mean in this context?
It's not just giving something a label.
No. In the ancient Mesopotamian world, naming is a legal act. It's an act of sovereignty. It's about establishing a political administration. If I name a province, I am claiming it. I'm incorporating it into my state.
So the physical land was there, the people were there, but the political identities, the state of heaven and the state of earth, they hadn't been formalized yet.
Precisely. The text is describing a time before the political separation and organization of the Sumerian and Akkadian orders. It's describing a pre-political chaos. And, well, this leads us to that famous violent scene with Tiamat.
Tiamat.
Yeah.
The chaos dragon. The sea monster.
Right.
In the traditional story, the god Marduk kills her and creates the cosmos from her corpse, which I have to say is a pretty metal way to start a universe.
It certainly is. But let's look at the sociogonic reading. The text says Marduk splits Tiamat like a fish into two. One half he sets up as heaven, the other he lays down as earth.
So if we apply Kaçmaz's logic here,
Yeah.
Tiamat isn't a literal monster. She represents the whole territory, Mesopotamia as a single entity before it was divided.
Correct. And the splitting is the drawing of a border. It's an administrative division of that territory. One part becomes the domain of Akkad, which is heaven, and the other becomes the domain of Sumer, which is earth. It's not a cosmic explosion, it's a partition plan.
It's creating two separate administrative zones out of one region
Yeah.
that makes the violence of the myth feel so different. It's not mystical violence, it's state-building violence.
Which, in the ancient world, was often the same thing. But if you want the smoking gun, a detail that really proves this isn't about space and stars, we have to talk about Enlil and the pickaxe.
Yes, this was my absolute favorite detail in the reading. It's just so practical.
Right.
So we move to the Sumerian texts, and there's a story where the god Enlil separates heaven from earth.
The phrase is Anki Badara, heaven from earth, he separated. This is the big moment of creation, the big bang of their mythology, if you will.
Right.
But the so what comes in what happens immediately after.
Right. Enlil separates heaven and earth, and then he creates a pickaxe. A hoe.
Yes, the Jizal. The text is totally explicit. After separating the realms, Enlil fashions the pickaxe and places it in the land. He uses it to break the ground, build houses, and build cities in Sumer and Akkad.
I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. Why would you need a pickaxe to build a universe? You don't use a hoe to make stars. You don't need a garden tool to create a nebula.
Exactly. If this were a story about creating the physical cosmos, a pickaxe makes zero sense. But if it's a story about creating a civilization,
A pickaxe is the most important tool you have.
it is. It implies agriculture, labor, construction.
So separating heaven and earth is actually code for creating a class system.
That is the implication, yes. It's distinguishing the ruling order heaven, Akkad, from the productive agricultural order earth, Sumer. It's the creation of a state apparatus. You don't use a pickaxe to build a galaxy, you use it to build an empire.
Wow. It really grounds the myth. Literally, it removes the magic and just replaces it with bureaucracy and labor.
Huh.
And this geographical reality, it also applies to the underworld, doesn't it?
It does. Let's look at the story of Inanna's descent to the underworld. We usually think of this as a goddess going down to hell, to the land of the dead.
Kaçmaz looks at the itinerary.
He does, and geography is, it's stubborn. Inanna's journey starts in Uruk,
A major Sumerian city, so Earth.
and the text says she travels through the cities of Sumer and Akkad. She isn't teleporting to some spectral dimension, she is traveling a physical route.
So what is the underworld in this context, if she's just walking down the road?
In Sumerian, the word is Kur. And Kaçmaz explains that initially, Kur wasn't hell in the way we think of it now. It just meant the mountain lands or foreign lands. It was simply a political sub-area, a territory that was distinct from the established heaven-earth order of Akkad and Sumer.
So her descent was basically a diplomatic trip, or maybe a hostile takeover attempt of a neighboring territory.
Precisely. It was movement between power centers. The mystical parts, dying and coming back to life, were likely metaphors for political defeat and restoration. Or maybe they were added later as the political reality faded into legend. But the core of the text is a map.
And this brings us to the legacy of this whole heaven and earth concept. Because it didn't just stay in Mesopotamia, did it?
Mm-hmm.
Kaçmaz argues this binary became the template for pretty much everything that followed in the region.
It is remarkably persistent. Once that formula was set, universe equals ruling power plus productive land, it just got copied by neighboring cultures. Kaçmaz points to the Iliad as a prime example.
Oh, the oath scene. In Book 3 of the Iliad, they say, "Witness this oath. both earth and heaven.
Yes, but look closely at the ritual details. They sacrificed 2 sheep.
A white sheep and a black sheep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me guess based on what we said earlier. The white sheep is for the sun, which means heaven.
Correct. The white sheep is for the sun and heaven, and the black sheep is for the earth.
That matches the Akkad Sumer binary perfectly. Akkad is white, sun, heaven. Sumer is black, moon, earth.
And Kaçmaz argues this is not a coincidence. It's not about good versus evil symbolism, which is how we often interpret black and white today. It's about those old directional and societal attributes from Mesopotamia. The Greeks basically inherited the state protocol of their neighbors.
It's like they downloaded the operating system of civilization from Mesopotamia. And of course, you see this in the Holy Scriptures too. The Bible, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
And the Quran. He created what is on earth, then turned to heaven, or the New Testament. On earth as it is in heaven. Kaçmaz's point is that these are not just poetic phrases, they are continuations of that very specific Mesopotamian political formula.
So when we read heaven and earth in these texts, we should be reading what? The state and the people, or the rulers and the subjects.
In a sociogonic sense, yes. The universe in these texts is the totality of the social order. Heaven represents the authority, the high place, the air, the mobile power.
The nomadic conquerors.
Often, yes, associated with the masculine. And earth represents the low place, the soil, the production, the settled people, often associated with the feminine, the fertile, the subjects.
This really flips the script on how we view the history of sociology, doesn't it? I mean, Kaçmaz seems to have a bit of a bone to pick with the founding fathers of sociology.
He does. He offers a sharp critique. He argues that early sociologists, and even a lot of modern historians, they failed to see this reality because they were too focused on belief and consciousness. They treated these ancient people as, well, superstitious primitives who are just hallucinating monsters.
Right, they view the myths as fantasy. But Kaçmaz is saying they're history.
Exactly. Take the example of the monsters in Hesiod's Theogonia, the 50-headed monsters, or the 100-handed ones.
Yeah, I'm picturing these grotesque beasts from a movie.
Of course. But Kaçmaz asks, what is a 50-headed entity in a political text?
Well, if you stop thinking about biology and start thinking about organizations, it sounds like a military unit.
That is the sociogonic explanation. Kaçmaz connects it to Enlil's 50 guards in the Sumerian texts. There's a reference to the Sacred 50. It's a royal protection unit, a detachment of 50 slavers.
So historians saw demons where they should have seen bureaucrats and soldiers.
They missed the state apparatus, they got lost in the fantasy of the myth, and they missed the reality of the institution. When the text talks about a multi-headed beast guarding the gates, it's very likely talking about a garrison of guards. It's not a monster. It represents the power of the state.
That is such a powerful shift in perspective.
Yeah.
It makes the ancient world feel so much more organized and cynical, maybe, but definitely sophisticated.
Sophisticated is absolutely the right word. We tend to patronize the past. We look back at ancient Mesopotamia and think of them as people trying to explain why it rains with magic. But Kaçmaz is showing us that they were sophisticated societies codifying their political order. They were writing their constitution, and they used the language of heaven and earth to do it.
It really does change everything. Instead of reading these stories as fairy tales, we're reading the archives of a merger between two rival cultures, the nomads and the farmers.
It validates the idea that knowledge, especially religious knowledge, was never about the abstract. It was always about the concrete, the geographical, and the political. It's about power, who holds it, where they live, and how they justify their rule over the people who work the land.
So here's a question for you then, and for everyone listening. If this binary of heaven and earth, this political map of ancient Iraq, is baked into the very foundation of the Bible, the Iliad, and the Quran, does that mean we are all still living in a mental map drawn by the Akkadians and Sumerians?
It raises a profound question. We use these terms heaven and earth every day to describe our reality. We might think we're talking about science or theology or philosophy, but we might just be echoing the political geography of the Euphrates River Basin from 4,000 years ago.
It's like we're still running the software they wrote. And it makes you wonder how many other myths that we treat as pure fantasy are actually just misunderstood history books waiting for the right decoder.
And that's the beauty of this kind of research. The text hasn't changed. The clay tablets are the same. But our ability to read them, that is constantly evolving.
Safa Kaçmaz's Sociogonic, definitely a framework that turns the lights on in a very dark room. Thanks for walking us through this sociogonic landscape.
My pleasure. It's always good to see the ground beneath our feet a little more clearly.
And thank you for listening to this deep dive. Keep questioning the map. We'll see you next time.